Lately Americans have been playing a quickened, shortened tune. We were transfixed for months after Oklahoma City and 9/11s, for weeks after the Boston Marathon, more like days after San Bernardino. We watched the Columbine memorial services live, knew the faces of the Newtown children, but probably can't name the victims of Sutherland Springs. The nation paid the family of each 9/11's victim $3.1 million, those injured in Orlando and Las Vegas started GoFundMe accounts and many struggle to pay their medical bills. The popular word for this insta-back to normal is resilience, and it is used with pride. This was a cowardly act of terror, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio tweeted less than 24 hours after the attack. It was intended to break our spirit. But New Yorkers are resilient. We will be undeterred. Resilience, though, is a symptom, a muscle that develops with overuse, a coping mechanism that hews close to various degrees of resignation. Resilience requires being able to contain certain emotions that would otherwise overpower you, explains clinical psychologist Alan Grich, and denial involves exactly the same thing. Grich has been musing on this duality a lot lately. Israeli-born but working in New York for 38 years, he wrote a book called The Israeli Mind, and he sees Americans following the mental path that Israelis started down decades ago. During the two waves of Intifada roughly from 1987 to 2005, there were periods of daily terrorist attacks. There was just no way to cope with other than to just go on living, Grich says. You clean up the blood and go on. Israelis took pride in the fact that a cafe targeted by a suicide bomb in the morning would be back in business by nightfall, and that people continued to ride the bus in the face of frequent attacks. And so it is in the US as well. The news alerts bing, the cable coverage begins, there is speculation as to motive, and interviews with partisans who declare either that immigration restrictions would not have prevented this or it is too soon to talk about guns, depending on the emerging portrait of the killer. There are vignettes about the dead, hashtags number Boston strong, number Vegas strong, and a candlelight vigil. A celebrity organizes a concert. The motions become familiar. Somewhere in this cycle a prominent public official declares, despite all past evidence to the contrary, that the nation will always remember. They were mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers, Donald Trump said in Las Vegas. They were husbands and wives and sons and daughters. They will be dearly missed, and they will never be forgotten. For individuals, Grich says, this way of coping is a good thing. It's necessary to face it and then move on, he says. Otherwise you become paralyzed and then paranoid. You amplify the dangers and overreact to them. But this treatment works because it creates the feeling of taking back control, and that element seems lacking in the current national tableau. Instead, legislators and advocates describe being reminded with each attack of how ineffective attempts at change have been over the years. Choose your reason, a hopelessly polarized society, a political system shackled by special interests, leaders who choose party over country. Whatever the cause, the result is a growing realization that grief and outrage do not lead to change. Those who see the solution as fewer guns, recall assault bans that did not pass after Sandy Hook and the bill to ban bump stocks that has been stalled in Congress. Those who think stricter control of the borders is the answer note that their promised wall has not been built and courts have blocked all attempts at a virtual extreme vetting version. Is the result a resignation that accounts for the quickened pace of moving on from tragedy? Is what looks like resilience really helplessness mixed with depression? And if so, what is the cost long-term to the national psyche? The paralysis you feel right now, the impotent helplessness that washes over you as news of another mass slaughter scrolls across the television screen, is how Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy described the phenomenon after Sutherland Springs. Its effect, he warned, is to make the fight exhausting and futile, to numb citizens into dropping their demands for gun control. We are suffering from combat fatigue, agrees Nikki Stern, an essayist and author who was executive director of Families of 9/11s and who says her cause is now gun control. We're being pummeled into accepting this as normal. We must fight that. But, she adds, she is not exactly sure how. If I could figure out how to get through, I'd probably have a peace prize to put on my shelf, she says.